Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is another episode of the Keto Test Kitchen, the series in which we take a look at various keto ingredients and see how they behave in different cooking situations. A couple of videos ago, when I was making almond milk, I also made a superfine homemade almond flour. I did this by drying out the leftover pulp from the almond milk. Then I ran it through a food processor or spice grinder, and then put it through a fine mesh sieve, so I got a really super duper fine powder. When I showed that, I immediately got some questions down in the comments, like, is this fine enough that we could actually use it as a thickener? Could I just take store-bought almond flour, run that through a dehydrator, and then put it in a grinder and get the same thing? Do you think that this lighter flour would work good as a breading? And my answer to all of those questions is, I don't know. Let's find out. For the first test, I want to get a feel for the weight by volume of each of these flours. So I'm going to do a level tablespoon of each, starting with the Kirkland brand almond flour from Costco. 7 grams. Next, I have some of the Kirkland flour that I put in my dehydrator overnight and then ran through a spice grinder to see if I could get the same sort of consistency as what I got from my almond milk. Level tablespoon, also 7 grams. And finally, we'll check out my blanched almond flour from the almond milk. Look at how much lighter that is. And 1 tablespoon of this. Wow, less than half the weight. This is some super light flour at 3 grams in a tablespoon. The next question I got is whether this flour could be used to make a slurry or thickener. So I have 1 tablespoon of water, and we'll see if this whisks together into a slurry. Well, it definitely turns into a paste. Let's heat up some chicken broth and see if this works as a thickener. Our chicken broth is starting to boil. We'll whisk in a little of this almond flour. And we'll whisk in the rest, I guess. Turn off the heat. And I'm going to say no on the thickener. A tablespoon of cornstarch would turn this into gravy, but a tablespoon of this superfine flour doesn't seem to have any impact at all. For starters, we're going to see how these bake, and we're going to do that by making chaffles. Each one will have a 1/4 cup of cheese. Now bear in mind, this is not a chaffle recipe. This is just a baking test. A tablespoon of the almond flour, and I always grind that together with my cheese before adding the egg. And about 2 tablespoons of beaten egg. Now, because there was no difference in either the weight or color between the Kirkland that just came straight out of the bag and the stuff that I ground, I'm only going to compare the Kirkland to my homemade. So this is the Kirkland on your left here. And on the right, we have the byproduct of the nut milk. This definitely is thicker. It's really holding on to that egg. All right, I believe our chaffles are done. We will move these off to a cooling rack. Now let's see what happened on the taste and texture of our 2 chaffles. First, the regular Kirkland. Kind of behaving like a standard chaffle there. No real stretch or chew. Tastes like your standard almond flour chaffle. Nothing to write home about. Then we have the homemade flour. I can tell you already the texture on this seemed different. Not sure how I would describe it. This definitely has a lighter texture to it. And you don't get some of that grittiness that you get out of almond flour. A much more delicate flavor. It really reminds me of that Brazilian cheese bread, you know, those little puffy balls. Definitely more moist. I think this is going to be very, very interesting to try doing some full-out baked goods with. And once I do, I will absolutely post an update. And lastly, we'll see how this works as a breading. Now, had I been prepared, I would have had like a chicken tender or something thawed. I don't, so instead, I'm just going to use a chunk of paneer, and we're going to fry up some cheese. Now, even without a lot of moisture, like a piece of meat would have, this flour is light enough that it's sticking. Good sign so far. Into our egg wash. Into some keto breadcrumbs, which I made through a combination of Aldi bread and pork rinds. That looks like it's sticking pretty nicely. All right, for the paneer, you can see that these breadcrumbs really held on well. I'll tell you right now, plain breadcrumbs on paneer is about the most boring thing you can taste. This is not a recipe you want to make, but what I will tell you is that those breadcrumbs really stuck quite nicely to that cheese. I gotta believe that if you seasoned these breadcrumbs with a little Italian seasoning and maybe a little fresh grated Parmesan, and then did the almond flour, egg wash, and breadcrumbs on a chicken breast or chicken tender, that would be a pretty outstanding start to some chicken Parmesan. So let's recap what we learned here. First off, even though this is a super fine flour, can't be used as a thickener. Second, it is far lighter than standard almond flour by volume. This is going to result in a lighter baked good. It's also going to result in sort of a softer, more delicate mouthfeel. Now, if you watched my special seasoned mayo video, you know that I used a failed hot dog bun recipe on that. You may have also noticed that it looked still pretty good, pretty light in color, light in texture. Well, that's because I used this flour. This is going to be my preferred almond flour in any recipe where I'm looking for something that's got a really light texture to it. Finally, in terms of breading, that super fine, super light texture is going to make it stick to whatever you dredge it in. So whether that's beef or pork or chicken, big thumbs up on that. So we got 2 out of 3 on this flour. We got something that works great as a breading, and we've got a flour that I'm definitely going to be using in the future on lighter baked goods. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more of these sort of keto science test kitchen videos, click that like button. If you're not a subscriber already, hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified whenever I release a new video, tap that bell and select all notifications. And finally, if you want to help out the Keto Test Kitchen, click that join button and see what channel memberships are all about. Thanks for watching.